Greetings, this is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. On tonight's show, weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call News staff writer, will discuss Israel's inordinate influence on the world stage, their interference in the affairs of other governments, and their political pressure campaigns. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap on the current events we've recently covered. Weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad updated us on the COVID pandemic and Delta variant that are surging in America and around the world. Now, the CDC suggested that vaccinated people didn't have to wear masks in public gatherings, and they've now reversed that suggestion. What's your interpretation of this move?
Yeah, to me, my interpretation is that it's another example of how confused these people are. Mm-hmm. They say one thing, and then within they're saying something opposite because they know how to handle this. The minister took the criteria in July 2020. Scientists from heaven cannot deal with the pandemic from heaven, and we're being shown this over and over and over again. There are certain faces that all of us know what they are. They're going to be posted in all these different news sites, and they're going to say something. And then not too long after, people have lost complete confidence because it's over and over and over again that these people are saying one thing and coming back and doing something.
Brother Shahid Muhammad, the math doctor and Asiatic Minds math instructor, spoke with us about student achievement and proficiency in mathematics and how Asiatic Minds is prepared to help students improve their math skills and abilities. Why is achievement and proficiency in mathematics so low in America's public schools, especially for Black people?
Well, the American public school system was never set up for the masses to be literate in any of the subjects, let alone mathematics. Those in power, the rich, bloodsuckers of the poor, they desire to stay in power. So they have to make sure the masses are dumbed down and illiterate in terms of reading and mathematics. So the school system was never set up for the betterment in mathematics. And then the American society, if we look at today particularly, is a society with a lifestyle full of distractions, sport and play, people just seeking pleasure, savagery, and all those things go totally against excelling in mathematics.
NNV News anchor Christina Muhammad was joined by guest commentators, Regional Student Minister Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad and Sister Deborah Muhammad of the NOI's Ministry of Education for a discussion about the impact of COVID and the Delta variant surge on the Black community.
With the Delta variant posing a serious threat, how can we expect this new strand to impact our community? Specifically, after witnessing the medical neglect that the Black community faced last year during the first wave.
Well, that is exactly the problem. The problem is the lack of diversity in the medical field, particularly in this administration, and the lack of equitable treatment in terms of there are two medical systems, one for the rich and Caucasians, and the other for the poor and people of color and even Caucasians. So the real problem is the comorbidity. See, they're often reporting, well, this amount of people died from the virus, but they very rarely talk about what were the comorbidities. How many of those people were obese? How many of those people lacked vitamin D? How many of those people had suffered from diabetes or cardiovascular problems?
Christina Muhammad posed questions to Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad and Sister Deborah Muhammad about issues surrounding the vaccine mandate and whether it violated our rights.
With all the underlying preconditions that we discussed earlier that are affecting the world, especially the Black community, and these preconditions are what? Heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and cancer. We have never, ever witnessed the U.S. government works this hard to solve any of those problems. Why is there so much focus on this vaccination?
Well, the Alabama People Card County has been telling us for a very long time that there has been a plan um, by those who are in power to cull the population of the world. And so the reason being is because this is part of this master plan, this scheme that this cabal of people have to cull the population of the planet. And so that's why they're working so hard. That's the overall reason why they're working that hard. It's because they want to cull the population of people that they consider to be useless eaters. And so that is one of the reasons among many.
Dr. Halim Muhammad and Sister Deborah Muhammad shared their thoughts about the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's eviction moratorium ending.
So, just a year after the initial start of the pandemic, where millions were furloughed and laid off, and many, by the way, have not yet recovered from this, will now potentially be facing evictions as a federal eviction moratorium has now expired as of July 31st. Dr. Halim, what does this mean for Black people in America?
It is a crisis. We're already suffering disproportionately from homelessness. And at a recent community roundtable that we had here in Houston, the Justice of the Peace and also the constable who serves these evictions in our community both spoke at the roundtable. And they were deeply concerned that, in fact, Congress had not passed an extension of this moratorium. So now those vested interests, such as landlords, mortgage companies, and banks, are going to have their way.
On I Have a Testimony, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was student minister Aman Muhammad of Mosque number 34 in Durham, North Carolina. He shared his experiences and memories growing up and how reading the Holy Quran ignited his interest in Islam.
In the interview, you spoke about how your reading of the Quran ignited your interest in Islam. And, so how did you come about, like, who put the first Quran in your hand, and how did it impact you?
Yes. Well, at that time, it wasn't as many Black bookstores and things of that nature at that time. And so I used the library a lot for whatever I wanted to do and research. And so I would go back and forth, trying to get little dabs of wisdom here and there and whenever I could. And at the time when I was in the 12th grade in 1990, my girlfriend at that time, she was going to NC State in Raleigh, and she was studying as well. And she gifted me my first Holy Quran. And man, when I got it, when I got it in that book, man, I couldn't put it down.
Last week, I sat down with weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad to discuss growing concerns over the effectiveness of the African National Congress in governing South Africa, its internal power struggles, and the social unrest. Now, has the ANC outlived its effectiveness and ability to govern South Africa?
I'll say this, the ANC came to power in 1994. And I just want to take this opportunity, of course, to correct a number. I said 24 years last week, but it's actually they've been in power for 27 years now. Okay. And, they're the first democratically elected government. Before that, it was white settler minority rule who ruled strictly by white supremacy. And so when they came to power, the ANC came to power, they made many promises to the people, of how life would be better, how, it would be a better South Africa under our rule. And of course, everybody believed, nobody wanted to see the ANC fail.
Sister Miriam K. Muhammad, founder of Heal Thy Life Center, shared how her spiritual life coaching addresses the overall health condition of women and girls through hands-on workshops, health seminars, lectures, and retreats. Do you feel there's a lack or a void of this type of information or even this type of space for space like yours in today's society?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I feel like women are treated as if we're a new species to the planet. When it comes to our health, whether mental health, physical health, spiritual health, we're treated as if we're new. The time that it takes to learn how our bodies function is put to the sideline. If you look at the medical industry, we're not a priority. So when you go to the OB-GYN or you get a checkup and they're telling you, oh, you're okay, and you're describing your signs and symptoms and they're trying to tell you it's normal, but it's not normal. Or they're experimenting on us, or everything is always so extreme. You know, I may be having pain in my reproductive system. Oh, she needs a hysterectomy. Like everything, the responses are always so extreme instead of taking the time to learn how our bodies work.
Poet, artist, and social activist Ankat Rumi graced us with her art and transcendental poetry about existence and social justice. Yes. Can you give us a short overview of what you do and how you came into your purpose?
Yes, ma'am. I can give you a short overview. I love history, and I love art history in particular. And I study art history so much. And sometimes I just feel like there's something missing. Like I want to tell our stories in a way that's celebratory and not necessarily so sad. So I focus on people in our history who are traditionally celebrated. For instance, Harriet Tubman. But intricately, we don't really know Harriet. And so I tell our stories in a way that we get to celebrate the full being. It's not just like these little snippets of history that we get, you know, from historical books, I guess, traditional historical books, but just doing like deep research, reading her autobiographies, reading anything written on her in that time when she was alive, and trying to convey just how amazing we are.
Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. Then Brian E. Muhammad will join us to discuss Israel's influence on the world stage in the affairs of other governments and the political pressure campaigns they utilize. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds. Online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now. 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As the Zionist state of Israel's inordinate influence on the world stage has the backing of the American government and other world powers, its interference in the affairs of other governments continues.
I am deeply honored to be the first sitting president ever to address this conference.
America and Israel have a special friendship.
I want to thank you for helping to make the partnership between the United States and Israel what it is today.
The work that AIPAC does is a vital part of our democratic process.
In the United States, our support for Israel is bipartisan, and that is how it should stay.
There is no daylight between America and our most reliable ally, the State of Israel.
America stands with Israel.
At every crucial juncture, at every fork in the road, we have been there for Israel every single time.
And if we face the future side by side, I know for both Israel and America, our best days are still ahead.
I'm a newcomer to politics, but not to backing the Jewish state.
Joining us to discuss this is weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call News staff writer. Greetings, sir.
Greetings, Sister Rosalind.
Yes, sir. In May, the African Union condemned Israeli attacks on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and Al-Aqsa Mosque and the evictions that took place in Sheikh Jarrah. Why has the AU now granted Israel observer status?
Well, you know, they've been lobbying, Israel have been lobbying to get status at the AU for a number of years. And they have been rejected because of strong pushback from leaders such as South African President Ramaphosa, and others who rejected their presence based on the principled position in support of the Palestinian cause that Israel, obviously has not moved to rectify in now 73 years. And so really it was taking a principled position with the Palestinians why they were rejected. Why they are in there now, I see it as just hypocrisy of African leaders. I see it as African leaders capitulating at a time when they are very weak and have no real incentives to keep the traditional enemies of Africa off of the continent and out of its affairs.
Right. How would you say South Africa and really other nations responded to this move by the AU to grant Israel observer status?
Well, South Africa specifically, I would like to highlight overall because its president came out so strong in criticism of this move, which appears to be an unilateral move on behalf of the AU leadership. And, he knows firsthand. South Africa knows firsthand the kind of system of oppression that Israel exercises. South Africa understands because Israel is often compared to apartheid South Africa. And when you go to occupied Palestine, I would prefer to call it, you will see that Palestinians, just to leave the West Bank and the occupied areas just to go to work every day, have to get on long lines and show passports of documentation in their own land that was stolen from them. So Israel is an apartheid state. Israel is a state that literally keeps the Palestinian people in such dire oppression that even the International Criminal Court is investigating that in terms of a perpetual crime against humanity. So now for the African Union, whose nations came to power based on, freedom, justice, equality from white rule, either from within, and as in Southern Africa, or from a distance with the rest of Africa that was colonized. Now to let Israel in like that is problematic.
So why was Israel ousted from the former organization of the African Unity?
Yeah, well, what happened was that in the year 2002, the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, which was formed by very progressive independence leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Gamal Abdel Nasser and, the great Ahmed Ben Bella of Algeria, all of these who formed this Organization of African Unity to facilitate the total liberation of Africa from its colonial and former slave masters, formed this organization. Well, it went off course over the years, over the decades. It went off course. In 2002, our brother Muammar Gaddafi, our late leader of Libya, pulled the African leaders together to form or reform or reimagine, as we say in today's language, the OAU into the African Union. But because he was such a progressive thinker and a progressive leader against the enemies of Africa, he blocked the Zionist state of Israel from having observer status as it was given at a certain point in the OAU. And so it was because of the strength of men like Muammar Gaddafi and other leaders who was around, but mostly Muammar Gaddafi, who used his money to again reimagine the OAU into the AU and financed it. He had the strength to push back the enemy out of African affairs that time that he was leading and involved with the African Union.
Now, as you mentioned, they've already been outside of it at one point under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. But why has it been allowed back in now, especially after all of the bombing that we've seen this year of the Palestinian people?
Yeah. Well, again, it's one of these things that they should never have had. They should never have had membership in the first place. See, the African Union has a problem. The African Union is the classic case of the saying, black man, do for self or suffer the consequences. So the African Union allows all of these people in. Why does America have a status there? Why does the European Union have a status in the African Union? So it's the same question with Israel. It is because of the weak African leadership who have not cut the umbilical cord to the West to be financed. So the African Union is supported and financed by outside interests. That beautiful building there in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, that have the headquarters of the African Union was built by the Chinese. The money that fuels the African Union in terms of, in terms of its administration and the finance it needs to be an organization is based on a lot of these outside interests. So how strong can the African Union really fight for the interests of Africa if you have the enemy of yourself in the mix and at the table? And if they're at the table, they'll do like they always did, dictate to you because they're paying the cost.
Right. Now, speaking of bombing, Israel has now accused Iran of a recent bombing. What was the specific accusation, and has Iran responded to those accusations?
Yes, you're referring to the ship, the merchant ships that was bombed, owned by Israeli companies. And they accused Iran of being behind the bombing, which killed 2 people. I believe it was a British national and another European national from another country in Europe somewhere. And they blamed Iran. Iran, of course, said no, they had nothing to do with that. But Israel and the United States, and specifically Britain, came out and said and blamed Iran. Israel has been fighting to bait the world, particularly the United States, who is Israel's benefactor. You know, the United States cuts the biggest welfare check for Israel. And so Israel had been fighting to instigate a war with Iran, with America, and whomsoever will join on to that. So they've been forming these alliances with other Arab nations, because you know that Iran and Saudi Arabia are at odds. Okay. Iran and many of the Gulf states are at odds with one another. So Israel and the West takes advantage of this unity and this friction. See, and so this is why, this is what has happened with that they blame them as another notch that they're hoping it will become so hot that America will end up going to war with Iran. And we're saying that is the worst that can happen. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has warned for many years against going to war with Iran or anybody else at the instigation of the Zionist state. Right. The Zionist state does not have the heart of America in its goodwill. It's just a benefactor. It cuts the check. That's it. There's no love relationship there.
Right. Thank you, Brother Brian. We're going to pause for announcements from our sponsors. Coming up, we'll continue our discussion on this topic of Israelis' global influence. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
We are back, and we're going to continue our discussion about Israelis' global influence with Brother Brian E. Muhammad. Greetings, sir. All right. Now, I want to ask you this question very quickly. Over the years, a number of Iranian nuclear scientists have been assassinated. We've been talking about the bombings of the Palestinians for the last couple of weeks. Has Israel been implicated in those assassinations?
Yes, Sister Rosalind, they've been blamed and they took credit. The former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a few occasions have alluded to what they did. Just a couple of months ago, the former head of the intelligence apparatus, the notorious intelligence apparatus of Israel, Mossad, said in an interview that they did this, that they were the culprits behind this. See? And it is interesting because as they do these assassinations, which they have become very proficient at doing around the world, but particularly on with these Iranian scientists, Israel says that we have to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. We cannot have any nuclear weapons in this region that they call the Middle East. What sheer lying deception is that? Because Israel, in that neighborhood called the Middle East, is the only nation that have nuclear weapons.
Okay.
So to say that nobody else, what do you expect people to do? Now, Iran have never said that they were developing nuclear power for war. They always maintained that it was what they call soft power, for electricity, humanitarian kind of purposes. But Israel is looking for the pretext, again, to keep the drama alive enough that hopefully, if we chest bump them enough and we squeeze other nations like America enough, that somebody will respond and there will be all-out war.
Now, Brother Brian, in your Final Call News article, Israel interferes in U.S. business and politics. Why has Israel stepped up pressure on governments demanding them to enforce anti-boycott Israel laws?
Yeah. Again, this whole squeezing of the United States, little small Israel, a few million people, and it has the power. One, it enjoys nearly $4 billion in welfare. And if you add military aid on top of that and other kind of loans that Israel is granted without question, you're talking nearly $5 billion given to little Israel from America alone. Now, America is just one country that does this for Israel. Now, what you're referring to in my article, it was dealing with the government of Israel pressuring not even the federal government in Washington, but state governments to implement a law that over 30 state governments that started, in fact, where I'm at, right in South Carolina, with what is called an anti-boycott, divestment, and sanctions Israel law. Meaning that in state governments, what that translates to is that if you are a contractor and you're going for a contract to do business with the state, they make you sign a document that you will not ever support or come out against come out for a boycott of the state of Israel, specifically Israel. This is not pertaining to other countries somewhere, other allies somewhere, specifically Israel. And they make you sign this document. There were several court cases around that, but this is what, they have done. So recently, there was a case of Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
Yes.
That decided they were not going to do business in the occupied territories in Israel. And, because of a principal position against what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people. And the Israeli government went buck wild. And they pushed mainly Republican, which don't make no damn difference because Democrats and Republicans, for the most part, are beholden to the Zionist element and Israel. That's a fact.
Right.
So it was just Republicans that jumped out more vocal in support of Israel against an American Vermont-based company called Ben & Jerry's.
Right. Are anti-boycott, divestment, and sanction laws a violation of constitutional rights?
Then, well, that's a good question.
Okay.
And that, and that is the real issue. Whether these laws are constitutional or not. Because in the United States, your First Amendment right gives you the right to boycott. I mean, hell, you have the choice. If I'm going to spend my money with you or you going to spend your money with me or not, whether it's a boycott or not, you have that choice.
Right.
See? Whether you're going to divest money. Maybe I done messed up with your cousin. So you're not going to do no more business with me. So you're going to divest what money you were giving me for my services. Right? You have that right.
Right.
So,
now,
go ahead.
Why would boycotting Israel for its policies be considered anti-Semitism, which is a word that we throw around a lot here in America? So what would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, it's part of its game. See, they play the anti-Semitic card, as a means to destroy people's reputations, as a means to sully people's character out there and hurt them business-wise. This is what they're doing in this case. To say that to criticize Israel or to even criticize Jewish questions, right, is to be anti-Semitic. One, again, with deception. That's deceptive intelligence, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said. Deceptive intelligence. Because first of all, if you criticizing Israel, how can you be anti-Semitic when the people who are running Israel are not even Semitic people? These are Europeans who are allowed to be placed there. Right. You took the land from the Semitic Palestinians, right, the Semitic Arabs who are Semitic. See, we got to get into definition. What is and what ain't? What is and what isn't?
Right.
So don't call me anti-Semitic and you're not even Semitic. I'm closer to being a Semite than you ever will be.
That's right.
Because you are European. So they do this again as it's a card. They play this game to try to destroy you because they know that the people really don't get into definition. So people, and then they have so much power, most people find it easier to capitulate and give in than to fight it. Well, we're not into giving in. We will fight this because it is a lie, and I'm not talking on behalf of Ben & Jerry's. The hell with Ben & Jerry's. I'm talking about what they have done to Black people
Right.
And especially the name of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who is so far from being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, and whatever they want to call it. But they do this because they know that it pumps fear, and that's another way of them squeezing people into, what they want. Are you moving away from what they are against?
Okay. Now, why? You may be able to answer this for me. Why has Israeli President Isaac Herzog called a boycott against Israel a new kind of terrorism designed to hurt Israel's economy?
Yeah. Terrorism and this type of boycott, whether it's good or bad, it's in the eyes of the beholder. It's like beauty. It's one person's ugly is one person's attractiveness, another person's attractiveness, right? So, look, that's game again. So you're going to characterize a choice that somebody made that was political and according to Ben and Jerry's principle, and liken that to terrorism. No, what was terrorism was those bombs and those that you dropped that killed over 200 people in May. No, what's terrorism is what you have done in terms of the lifestyle and the attacks that you do daily on innocent Palestinian children. This is terrorism. So by him saying that, he's trying to put the extra oomph on it to make it look worse than what it is. It's business. It's business. And the tragedy with Ben and Jerry's is, hell, they just said they're going to stop doing business in the occupied territories. When I was doing the research for the article, what I found was they weren't supposed to be doing business there anyway, because it's illegal, according to international law, to make profits in occupied territories. So okay, Ben and Jerry's, fine. You want to say what we've always come out with about just causes, all that? Stop the deceptive intelligence. You left there because you know you could leave. See? But you didn't leave Israel because they only said they're going to stop doing business in the occupied territories. But they will be doing business with Israel under some new circumstance that they said they would later state. That's why I say the hell with Ben and Jerry's. This ain't about Ben and Jerry's. It ain't about no damn ice cream.
Right.
Because they made a move that was still easy on them to make. Now, when they say we're going to leave Israel until they change their position with the Palestinian people, now we talking.
Okay.
But you're just leaving something out of a circumstance that really by law you should never have been in the first place. So let's stop this.
Brother Brian, we're going to pause very quickly for announcements from our partners, and we'll be right back to continue this discussion of Israeli's global influence and what's going on with Ben and Jerry's and the statement they've recently made. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "Separate and Be Saved. America's race problems and deadly race interactions are growing worse. It is time we leave the children of our former slave masters and 400-year-old tormentors. Separation from whites is the only and best solution to this problem, a serious problem that is rooted in prophecy." This FCN Volume Number 41 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is entitled, "A Case for Separation." To read more, subscribe to FinalCallDigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the NNVnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Thank you again for joining us as we continue our discussion about Israel. Brother Brian, before the break, we left off speaking about Ben and Jerry's and their recent statement that they've released in regard to their occupied Israel. I want to ask you, are the owners of Ben and Jerry ice cream Jewish?
Of Ben and Jerry's are Jewish. You know, Ben Cohen and Jerry, forget his last name, but Green. Oh, I won't mess up his name, but yeah, they're Jewish. The founders are, but the company is now owned by Unilever, which is a $61 billion a year food conglomerate based in England. And you know, and I also want to say on that, continuing on that last point that we was talking about, that to show you the hypocrisy, all the way around. I'm talking about America, Israel, Ben and Jerry's. You know, Unilever CEO made it very clear that his commitment is to continue to do business in the state of Israel. See, and the only and so the question comes up, well, first of all, how could a subsidiary, which Ben and Jerry's is of Unilever, how can a subsidiary of yours make a move like this and you own them? Well, Ben and Jerry's have had a history of getting involved in social justice issues. And so when the owners, when the founders sold the company to Unilever, they signed an agreement, made Unilever sign an agreement that one, they will have an independent board of directors that will maintain the integrity, the brand integrity of Ben and Jerry's and its social mission, which was the part of their company that allowed them to get involved with social issues and come out with some pretty decent stances. To tell you the truth, I'm not, so critical. I'm critical of this, of the way they did this move, which was a good move, but to couch it as, something that it's not is a problem. Because again, they did it in such a way because it was easy for them to do it this way, not because they really have gone. And if you read the statement of the founders, they did a opinion spot in the New York Times, an op-ed in the New York Times, where they made it very clear. We're neither anti-Semitic or anti-Israel. In fact, we are Jews and we support, this is what they're saying in the article, in their op-ed, and we support Israel and and we do not support the global boycott, divestment, sanction Israel movement, which is a global movement that really the Zionists of Israel are afraid of. It's like Dracula in daylight. It's like, you name it. It's they are afraid of them because they have been lobbying companies around the world to make this same kind of move. And one last point on that, Ben and Jerry's, it took them 10 years. Lobbies, activists in Vermont who pro-Palestinian activists pushed Ben and Jerry's for over a decade before they even made this move. And then when they made the move again, it was done in such a way where it looked principled, but at the same time, they did it because they can, without it really hurting.
Right. Would you say that that is an example of the deceptive intelligence that you mentioned earlier? But also, would you say that we see that a lot here in America? We'll see companies and governments make statements that more suggest are related to symbolism as opposed to a real stance or an action toward change in our world.
Yes. In fact, people do that. See, and this is why we have to take principled positions that are real. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, man, a world-renowned leader, but not because he capitulated with the enemies, and not because he went, for some self-aggrandizement or even some benefit that just benefits the Nation of Islam. No, he's a world-renowned leader. And you know what and I don't want to say it's his philosophy, because I never heard him say, well, this is my philosophy on the matter. But I know that this is his position when it comes to the global affairs and getting involved in global affairs. Do no favors seeking gain. This is from the Holy Quran. Do no favors seeking gain. See, because they will try to buy you. They will try to pay you. They will try to make it easy on you. Just stop saying that Black people are the chosen people of God and not the Jews. Just stop saying that, and we will keep your reputation intact. We'll keep you on Facebook and Twitter, where they have banned the Nation of Islam, and certainly at times the Honorable Farrakhan. No, we stand on truth, and we stand on God. So if Ben and Jerry's and companies like that will take a principled position, make it a principled position, and be for real about it. Because at the end of the day, the Palestinians are still dying. The Palestinians are still suffering. While you take a principled position that again makes you look good,
right? Even
though it cut a whole lot of controversy in the process. But you have the ability to say we are. This is in line with our history of taking social positions. Yeah, but let's go all the way then. You still support, because if you don't leave Israel totally, you know what happens? The same Israel will take the whatever tax, I don't know, whatever the tax laws, how they do money from businesses, the same money that you pump into Israel of investment based on your company being there, it's still going to go toward the suppression, oppression, and persecution of the Palestinian people. So what the hell are you really doing?
Right. And I have one final question for you, Brother Brian, before we close out for today. Do you ever see America removing itself as Israel's benefactor?
No, they will never do it. They will not do that. And it will take it would take divine providence to break the economic back of America, as Allah's doing with the fires out west and the floods and you see what's going on with the weather.
Yes.
That's destroying the infrastructure that's already been destroyed. And so even with that, Israel will always be on the plate of support to support for the U.S. government. And if they continue that, and meanwhile, while you have the true and real people of God in your midst that you have enslaved for 400 years, Black people,
right,
while you neglect to look upon them and try to rectify your historical problem that you caused with the real people of God, you will go down supporting the imposters. But either way, God will be the winner at the end of the day. The oppressed will be the winner at the end of the day. We will be the winner at the end of the day.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Brian, as always, for your wonderful insight on these global affairs. We look forward to hearing more from you next week.
Thank you, Sister
Yes,
Rosalind.
sir. Thank you for joining us today and tuning in to National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Rosalind Parks with National Network View News. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.